Thank you.
Okay.
Are you
Yeah.
still there?
Okay.
There we
So
go.
you should be seeing an orchard of ancient apricot trees in the fog.
Got it.
Okay. So now I can start my presentation. Uh, and you should have a title slide.
Got it.
So as Mike introduced, I'm going to talk about the economic impact and technologies that are going to help us solve all the problems associated with climate change. And I've got one bio update to make, and I've got to do this for what gets distributed. I retired from IBM a year ago. So now I'm my job, quote unquote, is as a volunteer for Climate Reality Project uh, in Silicon Valley. So let's move on. Oh, that didn't work. Okay. So the outline of my talk today, I'm going to very briefly go over the cause of climate change and then some of the impacts of that, so that we know what needs to be fixed, and then I will tell you how we're going to fix it. So this is the second of a series of talks that we're giving to you, and I hope the background is sufficient that a very brief summary will get us all on the same page. So the cause of climate change basically is carbon dioxide. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased by 50%. That's from about 280 parts per million to now today, roughly 420 parts per million. May not sound like a lot, but carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. That means it absorbs infrared radiation. That is the way the Earth cools. If the carbon dioxide wasn't there, the Earth would cool a whole lot faster, and our average temperature would be similar to that of the moon, basically very cold most of the time. The moon goes from hot to cold because of the daytime on the moon. But on Earth, it evens out a lot. It's cooling a little bit during the day, but much more heat coming in, and then at night it cools by infrared radiation, and that is being trapped. So the net result is the Earth is warming up. And the impact of this warming, environmental impact, and I'll get into the economic impacts in a moment, but the environmental impacts are that because the air is warmer, there are more storms and more severe storms, droughts, and as we know in California, more frequent wildfires and covering greater acreage, harder to fight. And also because of the warmer air in the mountains, the glaciers are melting. The ocean's also warming. In fact, most of the heat eventually ends up in the oceans. The extra heat that is not being radiated transfers from the surface of the land and the top surface of the sea, eventually down into the deeper oceans. So that warms the ocean. The warm water is less dense, it expands, and so sea level is rising because of ocean warming. Evaporation from the surface of the ocean gives rise to hurricanes, and because the water is warmer, these hurricanes are more severe. California, we know all about atmospheric rivers. The warm water in the tropics around Hawaii gets streamed into Western United States. And this is like a fire hose. It's not a delocalized storm that spreads around and wets large areas, tends to be more focused. And if that fire hose is pointing at LA, they will get flooding and mudslides down there, as happened last winter. If it's pointed up towards us, Lake Oroville overflows and dams have to be repaired. So that concentrated atmospheric river is, we need the water, but not a fire hose type of flow. The warm oceans are also melting the ice caps, and that again is leading to sea level rise. And coral does not like the kind of temperatures in the ocean that we're seeing now. So coral are bleaching and dying. And then carbon dioxide acidifies the water. It dissolves in water to form a weak acid. And that prevents the formation of shells on the fish and the plankton that make shells. So that then affects fisheries. The shellfish are not there to be fished, and the plankton are not there to feed the swimming fish that that are part of our food chain. So that is the environmental consequence. The economic consequence of that is, of course, all of these storms and floods and hurricanes and rising sea level cause flooding and all sorts of other disasters, droughts. So this is a very busy chart, but what it is designed to show you is, if I bring up a pointer here, let me get a laser pointer. So each of these bars is the number of events in each category, and they fluctuate around, as you can see, but the general trend is clearly rising as we go into the 21st century. The line, the gray line here, is the cost of all of these disasters, the cost of the damage that is being done by these storms and fires and floods. The gray line is year by year. The black line is a 5-year running average, and you can see that is gone up in the last 4 decades by at least a factor of 5. So it is getting more and more expensive to deal with these kinds of events, major climatic events. And it's not just the damage that is being done. The cost of mitigation is also rising. So the United States, this is the US budget to fight wildfires. And this is actually comparable. Most of the Western states have a budget that is similar to the federal budget for fighting wildfires. And that too, in the last few decades, has risen by a factor of 10. So it's a more or less steady rise, of course, fluctuating around a bit, but and particularly the last few years, we're spending the budget, the state budgets and the federal budget for fighting the fires is going up and up. And overall, globally, it's estimated that in the trillions of dollars have been spent to deal with the disasters and to mitigate against these disasters. I'm going to skip the next slide because my timing is not so good. I'm going to skip this. Basically, this says that it will be cheaper to act than to do nothing. We're at the point where we have to spend some money to take some action, and that will save money in the long run. It's a case of you can pay now or you can pay a whole lot more later. And this is the same message, so I'll skip it. So it will be very expensive if we do nothing, but we've already done a lot, and the solutions are available. And so I'm going to focus now on telling you what these solutions are and how you can prepare to use these solutions in your own house and your own daily lives. And the first thing is that, as you're probably aware, the cost of solar panels and energy from capturing sunlight has come way down by an order of magnitude. It is now around $30 a megawatt hour, which is economically now not just competitive, but is in fact cheaper than fossil fuels. Similarly, wind has come down, not quite so much, but now it is comparable to the cost of solar. So we have solar power when the sun is shining, and wind power when the wind is blowing, and we need to be able to store that energy for when the sun sets at night and when the wind stops blowing. And I'll get into storage mechanisms in a few minutes. People also talk about nuclear energy as a way to go green. No carbon dioxide emissions from nuclear power, but that is in fact more or less stable in price. If anything, getting more expensive as we deal with getting rid of waste and all the nuclear safety things that have to be done, especially when people build nuclear power plants near a fault line. They have to be seismically hardened, as we learned from the Fukushima disaster. So nuclear is questionable and may, in the short term, not be part of the solution. So this is another, it's a busy chart, but it's basically saying the same thing. The top red box is solar, two different kinds of solar, and the sort of average price in the $30 range per megawatt hour. This is dollars per megawatt hour. The cost of wind, and it varies, depends where the wind is and how much wind is available. Same with solar. It's cheaper in the southern states than it is in the north. Wind is comparably cheaper in where the wind is blowing across the prairies than it is in mountain regions. But all of these three sources of energy are in fact now cheaper than any of the fossil fuels, conventional fuels. Gas combined cycle, that's where there's two ways of using the energy out of the gas, is the cheapest, but it is no longer competitive with renewable energy. So this is the good news, and we have to learn how to use all of this cheap energy and stop using fossil fuels and emitting carbon dioxide.
Campbell, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Back to that slide, it looked at the top that residential solar was expensive.
Yes, it is. It is more expensive than, so this is utility scale, and that benefits from the fact that it's all concentrated in one place. They're installing many megawatts as opposed to putting individual panels on the roof. So most of this is associated with the installation cost for putting it on your roof.
Okay.
Campbell, I'll share something in the chat box if I may, that's coming out, that's helping to expedite the process and bring down costs for cities and individuals as well. And again, the technologies are really bringing the cost down year over year.
Yeah. So actually, if you do have questions, and they're not very quick answers. They won't, and please put them in the chat box, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation, and I'll go through everything you want answered then. So we talked about the need to store energy when the sun goes down, and lithium-ion batteries are at the moment the technology of choice. The price of lithium-ion batteries, like of everything else I'm talking about, the price has come down enormously over the past decade or so. So it is now very competitive to have what's called solar wind battery. SWB is the acronym that has been used in the community to replace fossil fuels. And as a result, almost every major utility worldwide is installing this kind of renewable energy system. All the new installations, or 80% of the new installations globally in 2019 were renewable energy. So that is the trend. It is happening worldwide. The issue really is that it's not happening fast enough, and we need to use our voices and our votes to make sure that renewable energy is top of the agenda, that when installations are being put in, and even replacement of maybe not quite expired fossil fuel plants, that it's done with renewable energy. Very quickly, the same story applies to electric vehicles. Powertrain cost of an electric car is predicted to be less than a conventional automobile in a couple of years or so. It depends on the size of the car and the nature of the vehicle, but that's reaching that same crossing point where it is more cost effective to use an electric vehicle than to use a conventional internal combustion engine. So let's talk about other storage mechanisms. Batteries are not necessarily the best, but there are other ways of storing energy. And one of them is hydrogen, the simple gas. Two hydrogen atoms combined into a hydrogen molecule is a very good fuel. It can be burned just as natural gas can be burned to produce heat. And it can also be used in fuel cells to produce electricity. So if you've got too much electricity during the day and you need some at night, generating hydrogen is a good way to store that and get it back either as heat or if you're fully electrified, to produce electricity for your house. It's a means to store energy, and it can be kept in a tank for a long period of time. It is very simply generated when you have electricity. You take water, put 2 electrodes in the water, and pass a current through it. So you're using the electricity to separate the hydrogen from the oxygen in the water, and you store the hydrogen, and the oxygen is either there to use for medical applications, for example, or released to the atmosphere. There's just add a tiny little fraction to what oxygen is already there. It is not a pollutant. It can also be stored more densely by converting it to ammonia, that is combining with nitrogen out of the atmosphere to make ammonia. Sounds nasty, but it's actually a common technology already for those industrial uses of hydrogen that can be done from ammonia. And it can be stored in metals as well. Some metals absorb hydrogen very densely, magnesium being one, and then you can recover the hydrogen from these metal hydrides, either by heating them or actually in some cases by dripping water onto the hydride. So hydrogen is very versatile, and it can then be distributed either in the tanks that I spoke about or through pipelines. And in fact, there are major pipelines in industrial areas that use hydrogen for industrial processes. The caveat is that you can't just use any metal pipe because hydrogen embrittles some steels. You have to use relatively special steel alloys. So hydrogen is a colorless gas. On the other hand, there are labels associated with hydrogen based on the way it is produced. From the 19th century, it was produced from coal. Coal and water heated to high temperature produces hydrogen, but with carbon dioxide as a byproduct. So that is also emitting this greenhouse gas. And so that's not the preferred way to do it anymore. You can do it from natural gas that produces less carbon dioxide. So it's not quite so bad. That's called gray hydrogen. So the next way is if you can capture that carbon dioxide as it is generated in the reactor, then you're not emitting that carbon dioxide anymore. The issue then is, what do you do with the carbon dioxide that you've captured? You need to store it somewhere and not release it back to the atmosphere. It can be used in some industrial processes, but sequestering is the word that is used. Sequestering that carbon dioxide is not trivial. On the other hand, as I said, by using electrolysis and water, you have only oxygen as a byproduct, and that is totally green. No carbon dioxide, no pollution. So this is an old projection. I think it was 2018. Bloomberg said that green hydrogen will be cost competitive with other hydrogens by the end of this decade. I think that is being accelerated as we even as we speak. So the hydrogen story is really looking very good. So historically, we've been capturing enough energy to provide a few gigawatts globally. So this is old data. This is historical data, and it grows by about 10% or so every year in the middle of the last decade. The more recent numbers show it growing even faster. So the first data are these little blue bars down here that hardly anything, but we're already accelerating into many tens, and projection is to be many hundreds of gigawatts. So this is an exponential curve. Won't go on forever, but the capacity for storing energy is going up all the time. I'll go very quickly through these methods of storage. One is what's called pumped hydroelectric. There's one of these plants down near Los Baños, the San Luis Reservoir, does in fact exactly this. The water from the Sierras comes down into a holding area at the bottom of the dam. When there's plentiful energy around, it is pumped up into the higher reservoir, stored there until it is needed, and then allowed to flow back down, turning turbines to generate electricity again. So this is pretty common, this kind of storage, but there are not very many places where the geography, the topology of the land is suitable to have these kinds of dual reservoir systems. And in fact, we run out of most hydroelectric places for the primary generation. But there's a move to put the lower reservoir into a mine. So the upper reservoir is on the surface. So from generating wind and solar power, you can, from the lower reservoir, pump into the surface reservoir, and then when you need the power back, it goes back down to generate and be stored again in the deep mine. So there are places in Europe in particular. I think Texas has some facilities like this. So these are coming, and it is you need an old mine, or you need a suitable groundwater reservoir, underground water reservoir for the lower reservoir. Now this one may seem sort of Rube Goldberg style, but it is in fact looking very viable, and that is to use, instead of water flowing downhill, to have just big blocks of concrete, heavy blocks of concrete that are, when you have the energy available, lifted up through these cranes and stacked into a tower like this. And this is in fact a pilot plant in Switzerland. This is an energy company in Switzerland called Energy Vault, in partnership with a concrete manufacturer, Cemex, that makes the blocks for them. So they're building a prototype in near Lugano in southern Switzerland, and this is if the prototype shows the success that they think they have, this will go commercial. If you don't like a tower in the middle of the Alpine Valley, there are other ways of doing similar things. And a company has just taken over, I learned last week, bought Energy Vault, and are building and planning more conventional looking energy storage plants, and build it so it's now hidden away in a building like this, not exposed to the elements. And it's doing the same thing. It is lifting these blocks and storing them in the rafters, and then when you need to have the energy come back out, they're allowed to drop down, turning a turbine as the pulley spinning the wheel. So that's one form of gravity storage, just the simplest thing you can think of. There are other forms being developed as well, where hydraulic energy, so water is pumped under pressure, lifts a massive block of rock. So they basically chisel a block out of the substrata, out of the rocks underneath, leave a gap, seal it to make a big piston, and then pump that piston up with the water from below. And then when it comes time to generate, they let the block drop down and push the water back through the turbines. It seems crazy, but this actually scales very well. This block of rock is about 100 yards across, 300 feet across, and the bigger you make it, the more the energy goes up. If you're mathematically inclined, it's the fourth power of the radius of the block. So making it bigger is better. Compressed air is also being used. There's a company called Hydrostore that's making what's called advanced compressed air. So you don't just compress the air and store that down in an underground cavern. As you compress the air, it also heats. As you know, if you pump up your bicycle tire, the pump gets hot. Well, they save that heat as well, store that heat, and I don't know exactly how they're doing it, probably hot water. And then that actually goes back into the turbine when it's generating and gives you additional energy out as you regenerate electricity. You can store the heat in a big rock. This Siemens is a big German energy company. Gamesa is a Spanish company that makes wind turbines. In fact, made most of the wind turbines that are deployed in Denmark and Northern Europe. So they have a partnership just to store the energy in a very hot rock. This is at something like 1200 degrees centigrade. So that then you let the air flow past that, it heats up, and you use that to generate electricity again. Or you can use the heat, or if you put some water through it, it gives you steam for industrial processing. So lots of ways to store energy. This is a prototype. They call it the Stone Age, New Stone Age, because what they're using is a big hot rock to store the energy. So how do you make use of all of this coming cheap energy? And the answer is in your homes, you can electrify everything. So no more natural gas coming into your house, but everything can be electrified to make use of this cheap solar, wind, and I put battery in quotation marks because it's not necessarily an electric battery, a lithium-ion battery, or any other kind of electrical battery. It could be one of these other storage systems that the utilities are using to provide this energy to you. So in your home, you can heat your water with a heat pump. That is a very efficient way of heating water, better than just putting an electric heating element into your tank. This transfers energy from the outside air, takes it out of the air and puts it into the water. So you're actually moving energy from one place to the other. And that can be done more efficiently than just heating it directly. Similarly, heating an air conditioning, HVAC, where V is ventilation, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning is done with a heat pump. And your air conditioner now isn't heat pump. If you reverse it, you have a heater. And again, that, especially in California, where it never gets really very cold, is a very efficient way of heating your home. Cooktops can be electrified, and an induction, you're probably aware, is one of the most efficient ways of doing that. Gives you a really clean ceramic or glass surface, and the downside is you may need to change your cookware to absorb the induction heating. You can electrify your grill and oven, obviously, that's pretty clear. And your next car should be electric to make use again of all of this cheap power. So it's going to save you money in the long run. There may be some upfront investment, but the payback time is getting shorter and shorter. So let me summarize what I've told you. The cause of climate change and global warming, which it's global warming that is causing climate change. Carbon dioxide is the cause, and that is generated by burning carbon-containing fuels. Coal, oil, and gas all release carbon dioxide when they're consumed. The result is more frequent and severe storms, hurricanes, devastating climate events that cost money, cost to prevent, make damage the infrastructure, crops fail, farmland is becoming less viable. Farmland get lost to flooding on the one side and drought on the other, and many people are losing their lives as a result of it. I heard there were several hundred deaths from heat strokes from the heat dome that went through Pacific Northwest here and into Canada. So the solution is this clean energy. It's available now, and it's less expensive than coal, oil, and gas. So there's no reason not to do it. So I urge you, based on what we're telling you from Climate Reality and what you're probably reading in the newspapers and hearing on the television, is to use your voice, talk to your friends, convince them, tell them what I just told you now, and tell them what the issues are. Use your vote. There are still some politicians who don't think this is an issue and are being funded by the fossil fuel industry to maintain the status quo. And choose your the choices of what you buy, your purchasing choices, where you invest your money. Investing in the fossil fuel industry is not a good place to put your money. And speak truth to power, like your world depends on it, because your world does indeed depend on it. So that's all I have to say. I'm going to leave you with one more slide. We in the Climate Reality Project here in Silicon Valley, trying to get to as many people and talk to as many people as we can about this, answer questions, even talk to some of the deniers, hopefully, and try and convince them that they're on the wrong side of this issue. And I'm going to put this this link, which is a request for speakers. I'll put it in the chat room, and if you spread the word, we're happy to talk to anybody who is willing to listen. So I've run over a little bit, I apologize, but I think hopefully we still have time for questions. And I will give back, I will stop sharing. If I can find out, remind myself where I do this. Oh, wrong screen. So
Thank you, Campbell. Questions?
yes, I'm sure there are questions.
Campbell, can
Yes,
you put your contact information into the chat as well, please?
Yeah, this last slide, you mean?
Yeah, well,
Yes,
I can't, I was unable to capture that,
yes, I understand. I intend to put it in the chat room. So
And
I'm just about to do that.
your own contact information?
And yes, I'll add my own contact information, certainly. Yes.
Terrific, thank you.
this is a question for Campbell and for Steph. If you were going to put solar on your house today, what company would you call?
That I hate to give something we try not to do, but the biggest one now in this area is a company called Cinnamon, like the spice. I used a company called Day One Solar. They're based in Santa Cruz, but there are companies around. I urge you, just Google it and then look at the criticisms, you know, the reviews that are given of these companies. There's a consolidation and they're continuously changing. So I'm not aware of all of the companies in the area anymore, and especially, you know, it's different. You know, you're further up the peninsula than where I live, so there are many companies, and you know, either on their website or through Yelp or any other of these websites that provide reviews of vendors.
And you can do a search to see what your solar exposure is, and also talk to some neighbors and some people are pooling resources, whether they're in a housing development or just within a community that has some sort of board or group that gets together to resource this kind of information. And you want to be discerning, because if the process either costs or ends up being unnecessarily problematic, it has a negative kickback. And at this point in the game, really, there's no reason for that to be the case. There are a lot of, especially in this area, there are a lot of companies that are doing a really good job with it. So I also posted some information in the chat too, and that might lead you to some good resources. But Google actually used to do there's the sunroof program where you can put in your house and know where your exposure is. Sometimes searches come up, but you want to, again, just be careful who you're looking to for resources, good referrals. That might be something we follow up with on the next meeting, Mike.
Okay.
Too, for everybody.
I sent out, because I'm considering, maybe like some of us are thinking about looking into solar for our homes. And so I reached out to Wei Tai, and he gave me a resource that he used, it's somebody he used to work with at a company called Rectify Solar. And so I can pass that on too.
Excellent. He's definitely a trusted resource. Thanks, Mike.
Mike, was that the fellow that spoke to us recently?
Yes, the one that talked about electrifying his house.
Right, yeah. I want to get contact information for him.
Okay,
well.
so we have all of those email addresses and contact information for everyone, all of our speakers, so I can send that out to everybody.
Terrific, thanks.
Any other questions for Campbell?
Mike, did he give you a name of an actual company?
Yes, Rectify Solar, and he gave me the actual individual's name. So I will put that into the chat right now. And the person's name is Frank, and it's at Rectify Solar.
So Campbell, a question for you on heat pumps and installation.
Yes.
Are there certain types of companies that would that you need to look at to install heat pumps? And then the other question is, in terms of its efficiency in a home, do you need to put one in every room? Is it one per house? How does that efficiency work?
Okay. Yeah. So there are some HVAC companies that are specifically qualified for high efficiency installations using heat pumps. And I apologize. I should have had this information available at my fingertips. I have to go find it, and I will send it to Mike or Rob, or both.
Perfect.
There's a registry of these, and depending on the area, so I heard of one really good one, but they don't come this far south. So you have to be, cautious about the coverage of the company you go with. As for how you need to install it, they can be installed using your existing furnace and ductwork. That may not be the most efficient, because if your house is 30, 40 years old or older, they didn't do the engineering, the airflow engineering very well back these days. So it may be advisable to get new ductwork. And then for heat pumps, it is also a little more efficient if you're redoing the ductwork, to split it for different sections of your house, so that you're not ducting the hotter summertime cold air from one end of the house to the other. So there are really very efficient small units. So instead of having a big crate outside your garage, they could tuck smaller ones into the vegetation, into the landscaping around your house, and they're so instead of being I don't know how to compare it. There's not, they're huge, right? Instead of being something that's 3 or 4 feet across, these things are more like 2 feet. And more individualized for a smaller house or just part of a larger house.
Great, thank you.
Great. I sent a message to Steph. It's probably a good idea now that we're all maybe thinking about this, to get a list of local resources for these various options for us.
Yep.
Terrific.
And I'm happy to help you do that. And my omission, I should have had this more available to me.
That's okay.
But I
And
will.
okay.
likewise, I'll help out. And I also, I'm posting, I'll be posting a webinar in another resource from Advanced Energy Economy. And actually they've highlighted a lot of local, like Bay Area case studies as well. So that one webinar should lead you to some other resources that may prove helpful. And a lot of times these people get specific on the kind of details that Campbell was just going through as well.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are many ways of getting this resource, and many companies. And as I say, there's this vetting organization that lists the ones that are trained specifically in high efficiency installations. So I'll get the link to that organization, and you can go from there.
Great. Thank you very much.
And
Last question, Jerry. Last question.
Campbell, thank you for an excellent presentation, very informative. And whoever's been setting these up, I appreciate the program planning here. Campbell, if I want to upgrade my energy picture in my home, which is a home that's from the 50s, we have a lot of glass. We have a lot of picture windows. Do you have any suggestions as to how to contend with that issue in terms of?
Yes, indeed. I was in the same situation, and 8 years ago, we put infrared absorbing film on all of our west-facing windows, and you would never know it's there. The way they install it now, there's no bubbles or wrinkles or any obvious difference of what you look at. In fact, it's a little bit like a photographic lens. It kind of sharpens the colors outside. And that prevents sunlight coming in. No, the infrared part of the sunlight coming in during the day. And in the winter time, it prevents the infrared radiation leaving. So it's both insulation in the winter to keep you warm, and insulation in the summer to keep you cooler.
And that's
So
infrared what?
Infrared film, infrared coating, but it comes as in a sheet. Unless you're really good at wallpapering, I suggest you get it done professionally, because these guys, cut it to size. Our windows are on a gable end roof, so they had to be tapered so that it cut at a not right angle, and as I say, you'd never know they were there, and that actually is really very cost effective. We spent a few $100, well, no, high $100s. I think it was something like 600 or 700 for a very large area of window 8 years ago. And that was immediately saving us $100 a month for the 3 months in the summer when we really needed it, July, August into September. So the payback time was like 2 or 3 years.
Good to know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to end our meeting. If I will send out, well, Campbell's information is in the chat if you have more questions. And then we have our next meeting is going to be with the Climate Reality Project is going to be August the 6th. We'll be getting some resources from Steph and Campbell in the future for everyone. And Thank you very much, Campbell, for another enlightening presentation.
Well, thank you for having us and listening, and hope you all have a good day.
Thank you. We will now end with our four-way test, and then afterwards we will have our foundation board meeting. So for all the things we think, say, and do,
Is it the
is it
truth? Is it fair at all?
To all concerned.
will
Will
build
build goodwill and better
friendship,
friendship?
will
Is
be
it beneficial
to all concerned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And then don't forget to RSVP regarding the installation.
Mike, you might want to stop the recording now.
Thank you.